Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a topic that usually stays totally in the background, right up until the exact second it becomes the absolute most important thing in the world, protecting an organization's most vital asset, its information. Whether you're managing decades of historical archives or just the daily essential records of a modern agency, knowing exactly how to shield that information from catastrophe is non-negotiable. So let's get right into it. So, here's our game plan. We're going to define disasters and emergencies, identify their causes, look at the actual effects on vital records, and finally break down the 4 steps of the counter-disaster plan. Alright, Section 1, Defining Disasters and Emergencies. Let's kick things off with the big one, a disaster. Whether it's natural, man-made, or a little bit of both, a disaster is an event that is destructive and often totally unexpected. I really want you to zero in on those key words: destructive, unexpected, and long-term effects. We are not talking about a minor hiccup here. This is an event that fundamentally paralyzes how an entire agency operates, sometimes for months or literally even years. It's an absolute disruption of normalcy. It's overwhelming, it's chaotic, and it just completely halts your ability to do business as usual. Now, let's contrast that with an emergency. An emergency is defined as a sudden, unexpected occurrence that demands immediate action. While a disaster is really defined by its long-term aftermath, an emergency is all about that sudden, urgent need for action right in the heat of the moment. Think about it like a fire alarm going off. When that siren wails, the luxury of time is just gone. An emergency is that acute phase where you need immediate action to stop a bad situation from spiraling into a full-blown, long-term disaster. And honestly, this is exactly why our previous preparations are absolutely critical. You can't build a plan while the alarm is ringing, right? And that brings us to our third core definition, a hazard. A hazard is a phenomenon that poses a threat to people, structures, or economic assets. Think of a hazard as a latent threat. It's kind of like the spark sitting right next to a pile of dry leaves. It hasn't actually done any damage yet, but it has the absolute potential to ignite into those emergencies and disasters we just talked about. We look out for the warning signs of hazards because of the elements we can actually spot ahead of time. By identifying these warning signs early, whether that's a sketchy, outdated electrical grid or a facility that's sitting right in a flood zone, we can start to pinpoint exactly where our vulnerabilities lie. Moving on to Section 2, Identifying Causes. To really grasp the causes, we're grounding this explainer in the localized reality of the Philippines. Heavy rain, high tides, and typhoons and cyclones. We have human-made or technological causes, theft, industrial accidents, armed conflict, or even something as annoyingly mundane as busted pipes. So the real takeaway here is that threats literally come from everywhere. Your records could be wiped out by a massive, unavoidable typhoon, or they could be ruined over a weekend by a simple leaky pipe right inside your own office. Alright, Section 3, Effects on Vital Records. When disaster strikes, you aren't just left with a mess to clean up. You are left with the devastating aftermath of a hazard colliding with unpreparedness. When an emergency isn't managed, total physical destruction of printed materials is the grim, everyday reality of what gets left behind. A records disaster. This is a disaster involving a records collection that usually results in the loss or physical destruction of printed and electronic records. And a records disaster is incredibly insidious because it targets the very information infrastructure of an organization. It essentially wipes out your physical history and your digital footprint in one single stroke. So why does this matter so much? These records are essential to continued government service. Losing these documents doesn't just mean losing cool historical artifacts. It means completely halting vital government services that everyday people actually rely on. Just imagine a hospital suddenly losing all its patient histories, or a municipality losing property deeds. The real-world impact on regular citizens is immediate, and it is severe. We've gone over the definitions, the causes, and the sheer scale of the problem, but hey, we aren't powerless here. The big question we have to ask ourselves now is, how exactly do we fight back? How do we respond to and recover from these disasters to actually protect our archives? Let's get into the solutions in Section 4, the Counter-Disaster Plan. Okay, let's dive right into this master blueprint. The counter-disaster plan is made up of 4 basic interlocking elements: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. These 4 pillars form the ultimate comprehensive defense strategy for literally any institution holding vital records. Let's break them down one by one. First up is prevention. Prevention covers all the proactive actions designed to protect the archives, the collections, and the building itself from potential hazards. Think of this as our absolute first line of defense. The goal here is simple: stop the hazard from ever becoming an emergency in the first place. This could mean updating your fire suppression systems, fixing those leaky pipes before they actually burst, or just beefing up the building's physical security. Next, we have preparedness. Look, the reality is, some risks just can't be prevented. You obviously can't stop a massive typhoon from hitting so preparedness is all about getting ready to deal with those unavoidable risks to lessen their blow. And interestingly enough, much of the info collected during this preparedness phase actually forms the very basis of your response plan. It's about having your sandbags ready, your data backed up off-site, and making sure your staff is fully trained on exactly what to do when that siren sounds. And that leads us directly to response. When disaster actually strikes, the response phase kicks into high gear. This deals with the immediate and swift actions taken during an emergency or threat, specifically covering the first day or so after a major disaster hits. This is the adrenaline-fueled phase. Your prior preparedness totally dictates your success here, as you're working frantically to stabilize the situation and prevent further loss, while the much larger recovery effort is being organized in the background. Finally, we reach recovering. Recovery is the long game, folks. It's the complex, methodical process of resuming normal business operations, reconstructing and salvaging vital records and equipment long after the initial disaster has passed. It's literally drawing out waterlogged documents page by page, restoring digital servers from your backups, and ultimately getting those essential government services fully back online for the public. Let's step back for a second and look at how this all builds a complete timeline. These elements really flow chronologically. You've got the before phase, where you prevent and prepare in the calm before the storm. Then you have the during phase, where you respond swiftly on day one to the chaotic onset. And finally, you have the after phase, where you recover and rebuild. It's a continuous, logical life cycle of resilience. I want to leave you with a final provocative thought today. Take a hard look at your own organization. If a disaster, whether it's a catastrophic typhoon or just a simple busted pipe, struck tomorrow, are your agency's vital records truly prepared to survive? I challenge you to take these 4 steps: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery back to your own teams and start building your counter-disaster plan today.